Obviously, unsurprisingly, this issue is one which I've received the most correspondence since my election to Dáil Éireann. Emails, letters, postcards, phone calls, messages on social media. And I've met with hundreds of people, some in Leinster House, most of my constituency, or in clinics. I was the only politician in Galway West or East to attend a meeting in the Westwood Hotel in Galway on the Monday of the May Bank holiday to listen to and answer questions from pro-life groups. And very compassionate people and very interested people and very concerned people, and I was an hour and a half on my feet explaining, defending and answering questions on this area. I feel that I've taken the time to listen to almost everybody, those from every shade of opinion on this most sensitive and complex matter. Notwithstanding the diversity of the views which abortion prompts, I think it's helpful to start at the point at which I believe most citizens are on this topic. I believe most citizens expect that all that is humanly possible be done to help both the expectant mother and the unborn child should assistance be required. Irrespective of whether a person contacting me was pro-life or pro-choice or whatever other label one wants to use, I've made it abundantly and unequivocally clear that we, collectively as citizens and in this House as legislators, have a duty to uphold the principles and vindicate the rights espoused in our Constitution. Defending the Constitution in this matter requires accepting an interpretation of the law by the chief interpreters of the Bunnock na hÉireann, the Supreme Court. The sole purpose of the Protection of Human Life During Pregnancy Bill is to codify and to set out the legal position as it already exists, nothing less and certainly nothing more. I will once again reaffirm, as I've done in many meetings and many interviews, my pro-life credentials. I do not believe that this bill will lead, to use that phrase, as Deputy Higgins said, abortion on demand, to use that phrase. If I did, I would not be supporting it. I want to make that quite clear. I dispute the accusation that to be in favour of this bill and to claim to be pro-life is in some way being involved in verbal gymnastics, to quote a colleague. I do not agree with this. Listening to the contentious, often fraught debate, one might receive the impression that the Supreme Court during the X case was solely concerned with suicide. It is worth reiterating here that the Court said in the X case judgment, the Court held that, quote, the danger arising from a risk to life of a woman has to represent a substantial risk to her life, though this does not necessarily have to be an imminent danger of instant death. The law does not require the doctor to wait until the mother is in peril of immediate death, end quote. The Court, to be clear, stated that the risk to life of the mother included the danger of suicide. Looking back at our recent history, I regret to say that I cannot report that we in Ireland covered ourselves in glory when it comes to addressing the issue of mental health. In fact, to be blunt, mental illness and its treatment came a poor second to the physical illness. The stigma which persists to this day around mental illness is testament to this. To our shame, mental illness was, until recent decades, treated by locking a person away, out of sight, out of mind. And I'm deeply dismayed, discouraged and unsettled by the attitude of some citizens, both inside Leinster House and outside, on the commentary, how the connection between this legislation and mental illness. And to borrow a phrase from a recent mental wellness campaign, mental health matters. Sadly, to some, mental health matters, but not if you are a woman and pregnant. The dismissive attitude towards psychology and psychiatry, both measured, verifiable and vital branches of medicine, has been astounding. During the second round of extensive Oireachtas Health Committee hearings, the Chief Medical Officer of the Department of Health, Dr. Tony O'Houlihan, made some pertinent and valid remarks which ought to be remembered by all those involved in this debate. I quote, psychiatry, he says, is a clinical science based on scientific method and research. It is not some form of hocus-pocus that operates without evidence. We simply cannot say the circumstances of a real and substantial risk to a woman's life could never occur as a consequence of suicidal ideation, end quote. However, some commentators are absolutely convinced that once this legislation is passed, the women of Ireland will suddenly pretend to be suicidal just to access an abortion. This contention is preposterous. It is disgraceful and demonstrates a complete lack of trust and regard for the women of Ireland. Many people have cited the situation in the UK. The UK does not have a written constitution, and their legislation provides for abortion where there is a risk to the health of a woman. In Ireland, for this to be possible, would require a referendum in order to change the constitution. The undeniable and inescapable fact is that if suicide is excluded from this bill, we will not be giving effect to the constitutional rights that our Supreme Court have already found to exist. Despite assertions to the contrary, the law is not being altered. Despite neither the Irish Supreme Court nor the European Court of Human Rights has sought a change to the law. Rather, both institutions have sought clarity through a legislative or regulatory framework which will clearly set out rights as they exist. Respect for the law and the Constitution concerns not just decisions of the Supreme Court, but also for Article 43(3), brought about by the 8th Amendment, which provided that the right to life of both the mother and the unborn will be vindicated. This legislation has been framed and will operate within that context. Furthermore, as an additional safeguard, the Minister for Health will be empowered to act should this not be the case. There are two other points which must not be forgotten. Firstly, a termination of pregnancy will be permitted when it is the only option available. And secondly, medical professionals will be obliged to take every action possible to safeguard the life of the unborn should the stage at which compatibility with life outside the womb have been reached. If this bill is passed, it will still not end the debate on abortion. Concerns will still exist regarding the rights of abortions for women who have been subject to the most heinous crime of rape or incest, and nor does it provide for the exceptionally tragic cases of fatal fetal abnormalities, where the unborn child is incompatible with life outside the womb. These cases have been deemed to fall outside the present constitutional provisions, and as such could only be dealt with by the people in a referendum. This debate will continue long after the passing of this legislation by the Dáil. While this legislation is about clarity and about setting out visibly the position of everyone concerned, I fear that there is little clarity for women in the aforementioned situations. And these are tragic circumstances that any expectant mother would find herself in. And obviously, I've heard all sides of the story on those matters. And again, if these are put to the people in the future referendum, it will be a very, very serious and prolonged debate, I'm sure. We have witnessed the consequences of a lack of clarity before. Whilst there were several factors in the untimely death of Savita Halappanavar in my own constituency in Galway, nobody can deny that the legal uncertainty contributed to the tragedy. Medical professionals were unsure of when an intervention could legally be made. It is regrettable that some in this House have suggested that the clarity provided in this bill would not have played a role in allowing the speedier intervention in this tragic case. This government, both Labour and Fine Gael, committed itself to addressing the lack of certainty and clarity, and providing clarity. After much consideration and examination, numerous groups, meetings, reports and so forth, the statutory framework by way of legislation or regulation have been deemed the best way forward. In conclusion, I have no doubt that the contents of my speech today will be scrutinised and examined and perhaps used against me by some. I make no apologies for being against abortion for lifestyle or social reasons, and I again reaffirm that I am against the liberal abortion regime in this country and do not believe this bill will lead to this. But I also make no apology for supporting this legislation, which will vindicate rights already found to exist.